But that's kind of the two sides, right? You have the off-the-shelf type of system where you get a few options, or you get the completely custom approach, but the engineer still gets to draw a box around that pump system and have somebody, some entity design and supply it from a single offering standpoint.
Hello and welcome to the Pumps and Systems podcast. I am your host, Tom Baer, a managing editor at Pumps and Systems magazine. Today we're going to be speaking with Micah Audiss from Romtec, who's going to tell us all about package systems in the water and wastewater industry. The basics, the benefits, types, and even some real-life examples. So without any further ado, let's get into the episode. So thank you so much for joining us on the Pumps and Systems podcast. So we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. How are you doing today?
Doing excellent. Yeah. Thanks for having us. Good to be here.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So today we're going to be talking about package systems. But before we get into that, would you mind introducing yourself? So tell us who you are, what you do, anything that you think our listeners and viewers might want to know.
So my name is Micah Audiss. I'm the post-sales coordinator here at Romtec, specifically on Romtec Utilities side. So there are two companies. There's Romtec Inc. and then there's Romtec Utilities. But personally, I've been with the company for about 7 years, and I've done a variety of things from technician work to sales to customer fulfillment, support, pretty much everything besides, accounting and purchasing and some of those items. But generally just go around and teach people what it is that we do and spend a lot of time just conveying scope to people.
Great. Okay. So then let's get into our main topic. So we're going to start with the absolute basics. What is a package system? Tell us like the basic info.
So package systems, this is one of those terms that you kind of love and you hate at the same time because it is what it is. And in that a package, right, is going to be all encompassing. So I think to fully grasp, though, what we're talking about is you kind of got to look at pumping systems historically, right? So if you go down that route, you have traditionally a civil engineer designing a pumping system, right? Maybe specifically you have another engineering firm that specializes in the mechanical side and does pumping systems along that regard. But you had some engineer design a system, then it relies on somebody to piece it together and build it and kind of bid out the pieces and parts and ultimately build a pumping system, right? Well, along the line, somebody just thought, well, it'd be really nice if we could just draw a box around that pump system and just get something off the shelf, put it into that box, solve the problem. So historically, you have a lot of these kind of package systems that are really smaller in nature. Everything's single skid mounted or a single offering. It is off the shelf, and there's still a time and a place for those offerings, and they're a great fit. But that's kind of one side of it. So you have the package systems that fall into that traditional model where you might get a few add-ons. It's kind of like when you buy a car, right? Like you go to buy a car and they ask you what trim package. Well, you don't really get to design the whole car. You just get to pick a few options, let's say. So that is kind of what most people think of as a package system. On the other side is this package that really just refers to everything inlet to discharge, right? And I don't know if you're too familiar with pumping systems, a little bit.
I'm learning more and more through every podcast episode.
Okay. Yeah. So, the inlet pipe, the discharge, what feeds into the pumping system, where it's pumping out. Package to us just means everything relative to the system, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean you're held to using, these models, but that's kind of the two sides, right? You have the off-the-shelf type of system where you get a few options, or you get the completely custom approach, but the engineer still gets to draw a box around that pump system and have somebody, some entity design and supply it from a single offering standpoint. So both all-inclusive, but very different in their own.
Okay, that makes sense. So then why might someone want to use a package system? So what are the benefits of that kind of system?
There's a variety of reasons. One could be back to those engineers, right? Maybe they just don't even want to deal with a pumping system. So the ability to just turn to somebody and say, can you do this for me? Again, buying a pumping system is not like buying a car. You don't have quite the same amount of joy and nobody likes to spend the money on them. So the easier you can make life, the better. And I would say with both options, right, it's really reducing the amount of moving parts, ensuring success. That's kind of the key thing there is, the historical way again, engineer designs it, somebody builds it. You have all these different pieces and parts and, entities involved, and there's opportunities for error along the way. And so whether it's the traditional package system or kind of custom package system, you get the benefit of everything just being one-stop shop. You don't have to worry about all the moving parts. You can simply just call and say, I would like this package system, right? Versus going the full nine design, get all the entities involved. And so kind of just ease, I would say, is the biggest part of it.
So kind of a convenient, like turnkey kind of situation there.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Making life easy.
Okay, so then what different types of package systems are there?
It's kind of a little bit of a spin-off of that first answer there as far as what is a package system, right? But when it comes to types, first thing I think of is kind of water types or industry types, right? So package, at least on our end and in the world of package systems, you're going to be able to find package systems for wastewater, for stormwater, for industrial process, for clean water, right? Um, Almost every package system is going to have, some bit of mechanical, pumps, controls, level sensing as well, right? So there's a little bit of a mix between all those different areas, right? The electrical, mechanical, structural aspects. And when it comes down to it, the different types, again, I think it really just focuses on, the application first, and then those standards and requirements of the end owner. A lot of times you're held to, when you design and supply a system, right? Somebody's going to own it in the end. And everybody across the US has their own wants, their own preferences, their own requirements. And each one of those systems is going to uniquely fit into that in some way. So when it comes to types, it's really dependent on those two factors, the application, the water type, and that end owner and what they require out of the system. But they're going to look very different across the board from, submersible pumps to turbines to in suction centrifugal and all the level sensing and, add-ons you can have to that.
So speaking of water types, would a package system work? Would that approach work on all water types or just on certain ones?
All water types, a lot of entities kind of follow in wastewater. There, I would say it's an uphill battle for the most part, right? So you have these entities, wastewater systems have been around for a long time, and they already are kind of rooted in their ways of every time they need a system, they're going to call the engineer and get it designed and ultimately, get it built and supplied. And in the engineer's mind, there's a line usually around size and capacity where that cutoff is, right? So it's, arbitrarily, let's say it's 100 gallons a minute, right? And they're thinking, well, anything less than 100 gallons per minute, let's call the package guys, right? I don't really want to deal with it. It's small. But nowadays there is no size limit, right? So that really just breaks that traditional mold. And when it comes to those water types, again, we're seeing and dealing with systems across all water types. And the traditional mold wastewater, you're going to have a more difficult time. But in a lot of realms, like the industrial application, so when you get on these facilities like, Exxon, if you're familiar with them, or Chobani and like the food processing, right? A lot of these industrial clients, federal facilities, military bases, the ability for them to have this larger overall process and split out these package systems is really a great fit for them because they have so many other entities involved, more so than your traditional wastewater lift station, right? Where really the project is kind of that wastewater lift station. On these industrial jobs, you have the processes, other systems, all trying to, interact together to create a successful process. And it's a really good fit for that, being able to just block that out, insert a package system. So yeah, all water types, but there's a little bit of advantages to both and kind of some of the hurdles there.
Yeah, and it sounds like it can be useful across a variety of industries too.
Absolutely. We food processing, food handling, right? power generation, site flood control. A lot of these new developments are requiring some sort of capture of water and pumping to treatment. Obviously, wastewater, being able to pump and overcome, physical terrain challenges, getting that water to treatment. Yeah, there's, I don't know if you want to go into any specific applications or anything like that, but yeah, there's talk forever about that.
I am going to ask you a question later that may delve into that a little bit, but
For sure.
for now, we can move on to the next.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so then can you tell us a little about the installation of package systems? So are they easy to install? What does that entail? Things like that.
The goal again is just reducing the amount of moving parts, ensuring success. And really the thought is whether a contractor has installed one pump system or 50, this should be an easy process, whether you're going traditional package or custom approach package. Traditional package, you're going to see a lot of like single skid mounted type systems, maybe even just the tank structure itself that's prefab, pumps pre-installed. There's very minimal work to the system on site, and you can kind of think of it like a set in place, set and forget type of mentality, right? So that is traditional package. The larger systems, you can't necessarily do that because you still got to ship it, right? And the prefabrication side of it, I always kind of joke around, is it's like the IKEA, right? The pump system version of IKEA. So everything's going to be prefabbed as much as possible. We're going to be able to ship it to the site, but it's going to be to the extent that you're not wasting time on site relative to construction. The contractor is very plug and play. So they just pick it off the truck, they set it in place, stub in their piping connections. There really shouldn't be that much, compared to the traditional model that they're going to have to do on site.
So hopefully you don't get lost in the warehouse like you would in IKEA.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and hopefully they like IKEA. I always reference that. And there's nothing wrong with IKEA, but
Yeah,
everybody's got
hopefully
their own preferences.
that is true. That is true. But yeah, but I think IKEA is known for that kind of convenience and things like that. So
For
hopefully
sure.
positive association.
For sure. Yeah.
And so does a package system include controls?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's controls is probably one of the most overlooked sides of it, I would say, because, just from a holistic approach, right? We talked about these entities having standards, preferences, requirements. Most of those fall in controls, right? And they're going to want, all these different manufacturers of PLCs and smart relays. And, you can go on and on and on about all the different electrical components. So being able to provide that within the package system, 100% is the whole value, right? So you bring in the package, you provide the controls, the structural, mechanical, electrical aspects to the system, chemical, if there's odor control, right? And it should just be, by the time we're done, you have a fully functional system. Everything's great, and it's operating into its warranty period right after that. But yeah, electrical is they say some 90% of problems with pump systems are electrical, and it's not true. It's 95% of problems with pump systems are electrical.
So you mentioned earlier that there is no size limit on package systems. I think that's what you said.
For
Uh,
sure. Yeah.
so can you tell us how are the larger package systems designed? Is that significantly different from the smaller ones, or tell us something about that?
I would say the biggest challenge obviously is just getting it to the site. That's a big part of it. So shipping, logistics, in the package system, you're trying to live in the prefab world if possible. So, in precast concrete, fiberglass, polymer concrete, steel, coated steel, stainless steel, right? But a lot of these are materials that you can do work ahead of time on, provide some prefabricated value. Because again, we're trying to make life easy for that contractor installing it. So you got to think logistics, right? So historically, especially in like the world of round precast, you get up to about 12-foot ID, maybe more, ID being internal diameter of that structure. If you get up beyond that, you start struggling with actually being able to fit it on a truck bed. But we've kind of encountered in the past being able to provide these vault type structures with precast, and in stormwater industrial process, you can get outside of the realm of round precast because you're not worried about solids, right? It's a little more clean water. Additional maintenance concerns aren't quite there. But we really try to push the precasters in providing these what we call panel vault style structures, right? So you can imagine you got a box, Each side of that box is its own piece. It arrives on site, and the contractor actually sets those pieces, seals, and welds them at the joints, ultimately creating the box structure. But you don't ship this giant container that's made out of precast to the site. You just simply send the individual panels. And that's just one example of how you might overcome that challenge. But there's still ways with these materials that you can provide almost um, a sectioned off approach, still providing prefabrication to those sections, but then completing that on site.
So, do you have any real life examples about package systems that you could share with us? So, some memorable situation where they were very useful, or just anything from your experience that you think would be useful to kind of illustrate something about package systems.
For sure. Um, I'll give two. The first example, being on the post-sale side, I'm working with entities across the US, right? And I would say the first example is just, it's not technical, but it's the process, right? So the whole process and entities having to deal with pumping systems. If I had a dime for every time, a developer called me saying, hey, we probably shouldn't have went the old route of designing these systems and relying on somebody to piece it together, because as experienced as each one of these parties may be, a lot of engineers can design great systems, right? But it still relies on somebody to piece it together. And these developers are ultimately stuck with processes that are just lingering on, right? And just costing them money. And it maybe isn't one particular entity's fault, but the interaction and relationship with those entities can always be tough if it's new relationships and maybe a system that they're not comfortable with, right? That's kind of like the biggest pitch of the value, I would say, is you got problems, you call one entity. You get one entity to fix it, right? On the technical side, there's definitely applications that come to mind where you probably couldn't have done it without some sort of package system. And one being, we had a project up kind of on the west side of Seattle on the Puget Sound. And maybe I'll have to send you a picture of this and you can flash it up during the podcast. It shows the installing contractor racing against the tide to install a pumping system. So you can imagine this short off hole. You got the wet well down in the hole, guys wearing waders down there installing this pump system. And you got to think there's probably, the amount of dewatering that would have been needed there would have been astronomical. Pricing, costs would have been super high to keep that dry enough to actually install it the traditional way. Or even if you did have the precast wet well, you're still down there coring the hole and you're aligning it. And, you get this, everything's prefabbed, pre-aligned, pre-cored ahead of time. And you'll see in this photo that, it's probably not even possible because they get the water down, and as they're stacking the barrels of this wet well up to the top slab, the tide is rising with that. So, without the prefab side of it, again, you're going to be either not doing it in that spot or it's going to cost you a ton of money.
Before we wrap things up, is there anything else you'd like to share with us, or any final thoughts you want to leave us with when it comes to package systems?
I would say, a big thing as I'm teaching, engineers and cities and owners, right? The package system isn't here just to derail every pumping system process that ever existed, right? There's still a time and a place for the smaller package systems, still a time and a place for those. A lot of engineers design systems in-house, and they might see that as, well, this is what we do, and I don't know if there's a good fit for us, right? That's okay. Not every project's going to be a good fit, right? But there's still the projects where it's, not in the budget, you don't have time for it, or it's just one you don't want to have to deal with. And just the ability to draw a box around that pump system and have that from a package system approach is a huge value. And kind of further on that, you have these entities that are even just evaluating future projects, right? Specifically, you take like a developer, right? Being able to call a package entity, get, some sort of pricing on the complete package and having that be refined, being able to have that is a huge value, right? For us, we've been around since 2000, but a lot of these other package manufacturers been around since, early 1900s or whatever it may be, right? So been around forever. And there's just a big value to it. And I think, these systems have come a long ways, technology's come a long way. And you're definitely not wrong or taking the shortcut route when it comes to a package system.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Huge thanks to Micah for taking the time to speak with us today about package systems. If you've enjoyed listening to the podcast and would like the chance to watch it, head over to our YouTube channel for the full video version. That's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and we will see you next time.